to have a follow-up on the survey series that Kuhn Logistics University, Help Logistics and the Global Logistics Cluster have conducted in 2020 to analyse the impact of COVID-19 on humanitarian supply chains. And in the meantime, a new survey has been launched, which is looking at the state of logistics, including the most relevant topics, such as innovation, sustainability, localization, preparedness, and resilience. So, as you know, the survey is going to be conducted every 6 months to see how trends are going and identify any gaps and developments that we need to address. But if you want to hear the updates so far and what the findings are, I'm going to hand over now to Sean Rafter, Managing Director of Help Logistics, who's going to take us through the findings. Sean.
Thanks, Anya. I've got a fast and furious presentation with analysis hot off the press, so to speak. First of all, a thank you to the Kuhn Logistics University. I think Professor Maria Bezu is online today as well, so I'll be grateful for her inputs. So the KLU has applied its rigor and methodology to support this next iteration of the Global Supply Chain Survey. And I was listening to Professor Luc van Wassenhoff earlier, and I think this is a great example actually of how to connect with academia to support short-term support for humanitarian operations. So I'm going to switch to presentation mode. Just to mention that this is done through the new Centre of Excellence set up at the KLU, which is now the third Centre of Excellence along with Maritime and Sustainability. So it's a really excellent platform for which to provide support to the humanitarian community. So hopefully you're seeing the presentation here. This is going to be, as Anya said, we would love to do this every 6 months, and hopefully at the end of this very quick overview, the benefits will be clear, and we will get the engagement to do the surveys on a regular frequency, because for me going through the data was really interesting, and I'll share some of the insights with you today. So first of all, why did we undertake the survey during COVID-19? And we should say that there is a lot of survey overload, a lot of data information overload sometimes. But the reason for having this information is really to determine the attitude and reaction of what's going on in our global supply chains and how it affects humanitarian operations. To be able to observe from a close distance and to be able to steer and course correct by supporting the community to understand what are the activities that every organization is going through, what are the challenges and opportunities everybody is facing, and how are they collectively addressing those challenges. And of course, this analysis also to evoke discussion. What we're looking at today is a very quick analysis. We are still getting results coming in, so a more detailed report and analysis will follow. But I think already we can start to see some interesting data coming in. And as Anya also mentioned, this is another survey by KLU to support humanitarian action. So a little bit about the representation in the survey, and this is significantly important because this has been one of the strongest responses to a global survey that we've seen. If we look at the number of respondents, we've had over 609. Normally around 100, 150 is considered a pretty good sample. this is an incredibly strong response. So there's a real interest to understand and get some perspective on the impact. If we were looking at a sample size of organizations, that would tell us that our margin of error is pretty low and our confidence very high in what the data is telling us. So that's just to kind of give some credibility and confidence in what we're looking at. Demographic speaking, also fantastic diversity of responses. As we can see, we've got great representation from humanitarian sector divided across UN, NGO and Red Cross movements, academia, private sector and government as well, also responding to the survey. Looking across the breakdown by region, you can see a lot of national staff responded, country offices, field offices, and that's really giving us a very strong data base to which to analyze the respondents. So I think this is really important to note, a great response rate. So thanks to everybody who responded, and hopefully we can have the same response in future surveys. So with that, a little caveat before I dive into the first analysis is that we are just looking at very data that's just come in. So we want to do a more detailed analysis, cross-cutting across the different sectors, demographics. This will come in a more detailed report. So what we can say is that, which is good news for the majority of people on this call, is that logistics and supply chain importance is not in doubt. So there has been a very strong correlation with the importance of supply chain and logistics, as we'd expect. You could say with a massive global disruption to supply chains, not only is this evident to logisticians and supply chain people, but we're seeing it at the leadership level, public opinion, obviously more aware of the importance of supply chain and logistics. So good to see. We're also seeing that represented in investment in capacity building. So there is a very strong investment in capacity building. Over 55% is getting capacity building. 35% are saying we're getting above average capacity building investment. So there's a desire or a push towards investing in logistics competency and capabilities. In terms of organization efficiency, what's interesting, I think, here is to observe that we're seeing a more organizational response in terms of supplier framework agreements, capacity building, improving operation procedures and manuals over strategic prepositioning. And that might be for a couple of reasons. There may have already been prepositioning in the strategy. Maybe prepositioning is still not clear what needs to be done here, but there is definitely across the board more emphasis and more energy going into these top three activities. And that might also be trying to align with cold chain demands, where a lot of framework agreements, supplier contracts are needed, and then in developing operating procedures for cold chain and vaccine management, if they weren't existing, training staff on new medical logistics. So that would correlate quite well to where these preparedness efforts are being focused. In terms of costs, this is another interesting response that we're seeing. About 4 to 6% across the supply chain increases. So everything across procurement, distribution, transport, warehousing, all are seeing about a 5% average increase. What's also interesting to look at or observe here is the difference in local and international. So you can see that local procurement and local transport are experiencing significantly, well, let's say more cost than an international procurement and transportation. That could be borne out by the fact if we know that 80% of goods are shipped by sea, and that the pre-COVID rates for tonnage was about $1,000 to $3,000 per TEU. Looking now at shipping from China to South Africa is about 500% increase. It's up around peaked at $9,000 per TEU. China to West Africa, 6,500 average. So there's a lot of shipping costs is increasing, but still seeing a lot of cost affecting more at the local level. And along with cost, we can also look at lead time. So lead time has appeared to increase about 5%, both locally and international. So there are delays in delivery very consistently across all of the supply chain functions. We also did another question in regards the effectiveness of supply chain, or the metrics, performance in terms of responsiveness, reliability, cost, etc., and all showed improvements. So the performance of supply chain logistics has improved, but yet we have this kind of what seems like a contradiction in terms of lead time being increased 5%. But this could be explained that optimism was pretty low at the beginning of COVID on how much the cost and lead time would be to respond. It may have been at 10% budget, extra budget for operations. And what seems to be happening is that so far the experience cost and lead time is only 5% increased in cost and 5% less in lead time. Could be one explanation. Looking at risks, so I really like the acronym of VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I think it's a great way, and certainly when we look at the response here, we're seeing that demand uncertainty is really clear across international and local practitioners. It's the same top three, and that we haven't yet got a good understanding to be able to counter uncertainty at the moment. Complexity and ambiguity we generally deal with, but certainly we still maybe haven't felt the problems of importation delays in the future and security issues. So these are all very high in terms of risks on the near horizon. So looking towards the end of 21 into 22. What's interesting to observe here, we did a little bit of a dive into some of the respondents because we felt coordination might be an interesting one to look at. I've highlighted it here, and it comes down quite low, but quite interestingly, if you look at the demographic, coordination is very high if you look at the international level, at a headquarters and regional level. But coordination is less of an issue at the field level. So this might give some insights into where the challenge is in terms of information flow and is occurring. There's definitely a felt problem at the headquarter level and less at the field level. And then, because sustainability and localization is very, very strong on the agenda for this GLM, we wanted to look at some of the results behind this. And we would see a certain, I'd say, below or on average in the area of sustainability. So in terms of what are organizations doing, there are organizations doing some things in terms of integrating that into operations, training staff on sustainability, just understanding what is the criteria for sustainability. But there's still some way to go here. There's obviously a lot of strategic intent behind it, but it's not yet being realized. And I think we can also say the same for localization in terms of, are the efforts being felt in countries? Certainly there are some activities like partnerships with local stakeholders is coming through quite strong and has been going on for a while. But it's about average in terms of full autonomy. It was an interesting comment by Luc van Wassenhof earlier that decentralization is not necessarily localization. And I think in terms of localization, there's still some way to go for that to be felt at the field level. Interestingly, with this one as well, I'll come on to that point in a second. So we wanted to then look at, well, what are the barriers to making faster progress in terms of localization and sustainability? And we looked at a couple of characteristics, and cost, time, and knowledge comes out as top barriers to localization. Less so, but still there is funding, organizational culture, leadership. So really the desire is there. Funding seems to be there, but it's the time and knowledge and overcoming legislative procedures, etc., which are the main barriers. What is interesting that sustainability has very similar barriers, both time and knowledge, and again the structural legislative rules to overcome or to understand, and similarly less so the organization and leadership. So again, desire is there, but time and knowledge. And maybe just picking up on the point of Luc, how and why we're doing the academic marketplace, I guess time and knowledge are the two commodities that we expect universities and academia to provide, to be able to step back and spend the time to understand the challenges, understand how to support localization, sustainability in this case. So I think it does re-emphasize how important it would be to partner with universities to spend time and research and develop our understanding to be able to overcome these barriers. I think it's important to note the relevance there relates to is localization being felt by staff on the ground? And it would seem to indicate, given that 66% of respondents are from the field, that they don't yet feel the relevance of localization. In terms of collaboration, again, it's kind of above average. So there's definitely areas of collaboration going. What's interesting, if you look at the private sector, in terms of integrated logistics, there's a much stronger integration of logistic services across competitors there. We don't yet see that so much, or it's about average in the humanitarian sector. So there's the shared services, integrated logistics is not yet fully realized. And so there's probably areas for better collaboration and partnership in this area. And then looking at the technology innovation, what are the technologies that have been realized and had the impact on supply chain logistics? And I think this is interesting also, that what we see is that the stable technology has been leveraged during COVID. So digital learning platforms, software to provide visibility on the supply chain, whether that's dashboards or supply chain software, data analytics to be able to understand what's happening. So all of these technologies that were existing and these processes have been leveraged quite strongly during the last 18 months. What's less impactful are we could say future tech, autonomous driving, drones, gamification, blockchain. And I guess the application and use case for these technologies have yet to be realized and implemented. So perhaps quite understandable response on this question. And that is a very fast whirlwind review. Just to give you, again, to reiterate, we want to do a more detailed statistical analysis and to dissect this data in different ways to reveal more findings. We will report the findings. And we want to, our commitment is to try to do this every 6 months and to do it with a quick turnover. The idea being that we can produce this report and it would help each organization to steer or direct or to support their advocacy and direction in which they're going in the different areas. And just to help us, you can hold your phone up to the QR code there, and if you wouldn't mind, there's 3 questions there, and it's really just to understand how you would like to move forward. Would you be willing to participate? If we could get anywhere close to 600 participants in the future, we would be delighted. The other question would be, how do you want the findings presented? Or are there any findings, given that I've just given a very top overview, are there any questions you would like to pose that you would like the report to answer? This would be great for us and would give us direction on how to make the best use of the data. And then where would you like to see that report presented, on a website or in a written report? Do you have any preference for how to get access to the report? And I'm happy to take questions, and also feel free to ask Professor Bezu as well, who's on the call. But thank you. I hope I stayed within the 30 minutes. Just about. I'm looking at the clock behind me.
You certainly did, Sean. And yes, are there any questions? I like your clever way of getting feedback using the QR code now, instant feedback. So that's excellent. Please do that. If there are any questions, put your hands up. I'm looking at the gallery and I will bring you in or put something in the chat. Anyone? I can't see any obvious questions. I know there was one with the logistics cluster team. Martin, did you have one?
Yeah, hi, does it work?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks, Sean, super interesting. I had one question on the beginning of the averages, like lead time, etc. Just like related to the standard deviation, was this kind of a homogeneous answer across all the respondents, or was there a lot of spread between people encountering a lot or less? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to defer this one, Martin, because that kind of detailed looking at the demographic across the response, still work to do. We basically took the inputs and we've just basically presented the data for the top questions. So if you give us a bit of time, we will come back and answer that. As I said, in the coordination one, we did have a quick look in, but I wouldn't want to report back. It would just be opinion and rather than analysis if I was to answer that question.
Thank you.
Great. Any more for any more? Is that you still highlighted, Martin, or is someone else wanting to come in from the HQ? No, I think that's Martin still highlighted. I can't see any more questions. Sean, do you have any other closing thoughts about what you're going to do with this feedback that everyone's scanning their QR codes? Will it help shape the following surveys?
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, it's one thing is collecting the data, and I think that was outstanding success to be able to get so many respondents from different sectors, from different organizations. But of course, now the next part is to follow through and present that data back in a meaningful way for all participants to gain from it. The more inputs we get from people of what questions would you like the data answer, what would be helpful, that would be a great steer for us to produce a worthwhile report. And of course, then we will be consistent in how we develop that. So every 6 months it will be presented as such.
And the presentation you just gave was, as you say, very high level. So are there some real nuggets in there that surprise you?
I think so. I think, I mean, all of them are quite interesting. Unexpected and not expected ones would be, that supply chain logistics is important. I think we all know that. It's certainly more, it's getting the investment. The cost and lead time increases of 5% is probably less than we thought. But if we look long term, I think we've yet to see the impact of costs. I mean, the growing container rates are going to have an impact on costs more probably towards next year. Lead time in countries with importation, I mean, there's yet to be massive deliveries perhaps in many countries. So I think it's a great time to do the survey to see where we're at now. But I think we'll probably see what we really be interested to see is the trends now, to be able to do the survey again and 6 months time see where we're at in terms of some of these points.
Great, thank you very much, Sean, for that presentation.